Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining our March information session about Open Avenues Foundation and Cap-exempt H-1B visa. We're going to ask everybody to stay on mute and off video for the presentation as we go through. I have been doing these for the last year plus, but Jeff is here today and I'm very excited to have him join because right now we're in the peak of lottery season. And that means that on Friday, the lottery will close and the H-1B selections will take place. I thought it was really important to have Jeff come in today to talk about a variety of options that exist for you, including a cap-exempt H-1B visa. So I think we will get started and dive in just a second. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Danielle Goldman. I'm co-founder and executive director at Open Avenues Foundation. Jeff and I co-founded Open Avenues more than 4 years ago. It's pretty crazy to think about how much time has gone by and how much progress we've made. But we started because we believe that foreign talent had so much to contribute to the United States, and we're committed to building pathways for foreign nationals to build careers here and open up opportunities for others along the way. So I'll pass it to Jeff and then I'll introduce the rest of the team as well.
Thanks, Danielle. As Danielle said, my name is Jeff Goldman. I'm an immigration lawyer practicing nothing but immigration law for 30 years. I've been the head of the immigration practice at 2 of the country's largest law firms. And for the past 12 years, I've had my own firm. We have 31 people dedicated solely to immigration, most of it employment side immigration, but a lot of family-based immigration as well. And filing thousands of H-1Bs a year, hundreds of cap-exempt H-1Bs, and I'm really happy to present today.
Awesome. And you might have guessed that Jeff and I are related because we have the same last name, but Jeff is my father. I've learned to call him Jeff over the years, and really excited to be here with him to talk through these options for you. Erin Carlini is also on the call. Erin is our immigration program manager. If you end up joining Open Avenues and our fellowship program, you will work with Erin. She's fantastic. She takes everybody through the cap-exempt H-1B process and gets them into our program and supports all of our fellows along the way. So Erin will help come in at the end with some Q&A, and she'll also be in the chat answering any questions that might come up about Open Avenues and the fellowship as we go. Awesome. So really briefly, Open Avenues, as I said, is a nonprofit organization that was established in 2018 to build career pathways for everybody, no matter where they come from. And we build programming for global talent to not only stay in the United States, but also train the future US workforce. Because we know, Jeff and I knew certainly, that when foreign nationals are able to stay and contribute to companies and contribute to society, they're also elevating others and not just building for themselves. And so we build programming to demonstrate that, and also have a unique work visa solution called the cap-exempt H-1B through our Global Talent Fellowship that we'll talk through as well. To kick off today, I want to have Jeff start with an overview of the H-1B, because that is what we find ourselves mostly focused on right now, and probably most of you are anticipating hearing about the lottery in a couple of days. So Jeff will start here and then walk us through a variety of different types of visa and green card solutions that you can start thinking about. And then I will take us through an overview of the fellowship that Open Avenues offers. So Jeff, if you want to jump in here, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Danielle. So the H-1B is a non-immigrant temporary work visa that permits foreign professionals to work inside the United States. The foreign professional must have at least a bachelor's degree in a specialty field. And the U.S. employer must be offering a job that is a specialty occupation, which means that the job duties are so complex that only one with a specialized bachelor's degree or higher is able to do the work. The H-1B requires that the employer pay the fair wage for the work. Danielle, actually, my screen doesn't go any lower, so I think there is some more writing below, but maybe.
It's basically about the lottery.
Yeah, because there's only 85,000 H-1Bs available every fiscal year, and the demand far exceeds 85,000, there's a lottery every year. It's always every March. The U.S. Immigration Service accepts lottery registrations for 17 days, and this year it happens to be March 1st through 17th. That's not always true, but this year it's the first 17 days of March. Only an employer can register. A foreign national cannot register himself or herself. The 17th is this Friday, 2 days away, and USCIS will close off the registrations, and they will then conduct the lottery. I think they'll conduct the lottery almost immediately, either late Friday night or Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, because it's simply a push of the button on the computer. It spits out the 85,000 winners, and those winners are automatically notified in the USCIS portal where the registrations were made. Your registration message, instead of saying you are registered, it'll switch to you have been selected. And that means you won the lottery. And if you hear the lottery results are out and you look and you see you have registered, it means you did not win the lottery, but you're still registered in case USCIS conducts a second lottery later in the summer. Because every year it is true that even though they picked 85,000 winners, 85,000 winners did not end up, all 85,000 do not end up filing an H-1B petition by June 30th. So if you win the lottery, your employer must file an H-1B petition by June 30th in order to proceed in the process. USCIS will then review and either approve or deny the petition. And if they approve it, the H-1B begins on October 1st, which is the first day of the next fiscal year. It is not too late to register. Registration actually can take only about a half an hour. The employer must do the registration, and all they need is to register information about the company and some minimal registration about the foreign national they're sponsoring. So it's definitely not too late.
Awesome. And I just want to note that one of the challenges is the restrictive system. So last year there were more than 480,000 registrants into the lottery. Jeff and other attorneys are projecting that there will be more than 483,000 this year. Even despite layoffs, the startup ecosystem is still hiring and is strong, and that's resulting in an ever-growing amount of registrations that will continue this trajectory year over year of a decreased percentage of individuals who are selected. I also want to note that last year, USCIS made an adjustment and actually selected upfront 126,000 foreign nationals for the lottery in order to meet the cap of 85,000. So rather than having two lotteries, which has happened in past years, they selected more individuals up front and then were able to meet that 85,000 cap with that number selected.
Danielle, briefly, one reason I expect over 500,000 will apply this year is because just my law firm has way exceeded more registrations than we've ever done before. However, I think many people are registering, and if they win, they're not going to end up filing the H-1B because of layoffs and other reasons, which means even if USCIS has selected 120-some thousand to order to fill the 85, there still could be a second lottery because I think they'll be very surprised that there still will be openings after June 30th.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So there are various pathways to consider if you do not win the H-1B lottery, or if you have not entered the H-1B lottery, because many people on this call just could not find an employer fast enough to enter the H-1B lottery. Here are some options to consider. There is an entrepreneur parole that has been authorized by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's a special entry for certain entrepreneurs who have received extensive venture capital funding. Parole means permission to enter the U.S. So it's not a visa status, but it's a special permission to enter. And the rules are somewhat rigid because you must be funded by a established venture capital organization or government agency. You must receive a fairly high amount of investment. And the hard part is the venture capital company that has invested in you must participate in the application and disclose lots of confidential information, which is why this has not been a favorite path for the past 2 or 3 years, because it can be very difficult to get your funder to disclose who else they have funded, how much they funded into other companies, and how much job creation has been made by those other companies. It doesn't make any sense that they require this confidential information, but that's what they've done. At any rate, just in the past 2 weeks, U.S. Immigration has announced that they are reinvigorating the program. They're putting more officers on to help speed up these applications, and they're telling the public to expect to see far more approvals than have happened in the past. So we're looking forward to seeing how this plays out. But at the moment, this immigrant entrepreneur parole, it should not be your only plan, because there's been such a high rate of denials that you need to consider all of these other options. Additional options might be an L1 visa for multinational executives and managers. The L1 requires you, the foreign national, to have worked for at least 1 year outside the United States for a multinational company, meaning there's a company in the US and a company outside the US, and they have a defined relationship to each other, an ownership relationship. Either one can own the other, or they're both owned by the same entity. An interesting note is the US part of the multinational does not have to have been opened and existing while you were doing the 1 year abroad. Many entrepreneurs start a company outside the US, they're there for a year, but they haven't even bothered opening the US entity yet. They're waiting to build, they're waiting to get some funding. That's okay. You can open the US entity, which creates the multinational, and then file the L1 application the very next day, because you've already been working outside the US for 1 year for the foreign part of the multinational. O1 visas are for persons of extraordinary ability. These are people who have risen to the very top of the field of endeavor based on evidence showing that they either have a national or international reputation as being above among the top. The U.S. Immigration Service has published 8 criteria that they consider, and in their first analysis, they look to see if you have evidence proving you meet at least 3 of the 8 criteria. And then if you do, they look at the totality of the evidence to see if it's indicative that you've risen to be among the very top. The 8 criteria are listed on my website, all over the internet. You can Google O1 criteria. And if you have any questions, if you think you might meet the O1 criteria or you're not sure, I don't charge to review a CV to tell you what I think, whether you have a fighting chance or not. The last one I want to make sure everyone knows about is the E2 visa for investment. This should not be confused with the green card investment immigrant visa called EB-5, which is the $1 million green card investment. I'm not going to talk about that today. What I'm talking about is the E2 non-immigrant investment visa that is only available to citizens of countries with whom the United States has a treaty for investment. This includes almost all allies of the United States. It specifically does not include India, China, and Russia, and so many others. Here's how it works. If you are a citizen of one of the treaty countries, if there is a US entity that is at least 50% owned by a citizen of a treaty country, and it can be you can be the citizen that owns at least 50%. And if that US entity receives a substantial investment, then that US entity can file an E2 visa for you. What is a substantial investment? Well, it's a complicated formula if you're a very large company, but if you're a startup, it's a very simple formula. An investment is substantial if it's enough to cover the cost of opening the US entity and getting the US entity up and running and doing business. So if it costs $75,000 to get your company up and running, and there's an investment of $75,000, that is substantial. While there's no specific amount of money in the regulations that equates to substantial, we know that most officers are never going to consider less than 50,000, and most would like to see 100,000.
And the last one there is the cap-exempt H-1B that we're going to get to in a few minutes.
I think everyone on the call, if you've entered the lottery and you lose, there are a couple of options you need to consider. If there are no other options, if you're not extraordinary, so you can't file a no, if you're not a citizen of a treaty country and you can't do an E2, if you don't want to go abroad and L1 is out of the question, you can consider these options. You could apply to change your status to be a visitor, either a B1, which is a business visitor, or a B2, which is a visitor for pleasure or a tourist. You must apply prior to the end of your current status. So if you're here in OPT, you have the last day of OPT, which then kicks off a 60-day grace period, and you must apply within that 60-day grace period. And if you do, if you can prove you have a valid reason to be a visitor, that you have the financial resources to pay for your stay here in the US, and if you can prove there is some commitment to depart the US, such as family abroad or job waiting for you abroad, then you likely will be approved for a B1 or B2. I want to point out one frustrating part. Many of you will apply to change status to B1 or B2, and then you're going to find an employer to file a petition for you. And they're going to file, maybe they'll file, if you haven't won the lottery, they can't file a H1. But what if you go through, what if you get a cap-exempt H-1B petition filed for you? And we're going to be talking about that in a minute. If you're trying to stay here in the US, you must prove that you've always maintained status, and that will include proving that the B1 or B2 you applied for was approved. That's difficult because it's taking months and months and months and months to get that approved. There's no expedite, and it can put a little stress on a petition later on to get you work status. But every case is different, and we can talk about that on a one-on-one situation. Another option for people who have nowhere else to turn is to re-enrolling in a degree program and getting another F1. How do you do that? You simply need a new Form I-20 from a university that's issued prior to the end of your 60-day grace period. And suddenly you're back in F1 status and you are attending a degree program. Some of these programs offer what's called Day 1 CPT, which means curricular practical training that starts on your very first day of your new degree program. That can be very exciting and very relieving because it would permit you to continue working even after your OPT has expired. However, all of the CPT programs out there do not comply with the regulations, and USCIS will look very carefully to make sure that yours was a legitimate university offering real CPT, and they will certainly look closely at your next petition filed. So it's not a perfect solution, but it is a possibility for you to stay in the US and work. Green cards sometimes are the life-saving way you can stay in the US. So but they do take a long time, and they don't give immediate work authorization. So they're not really the perfect solution, but sometimes they're your only solution. So I do want to go through a few green card options that are most relevant to people on this phone call. EB-1A is for people who are extraordinary in their field. It's similar to the O-1 non-immigrant visa that we just discussed, except for there's 10 criteria that you can meet. You still need to meet 3 of them, and you still need to prove that based on the totality of all the evidence, you are reached the very top of your field of endeavor, and you have achieved sustained national or international acclaim. One nice thing about the EB-1A is that you can sponsor yourself. And except for people from India and China, EB-1A is current, meaning not only could you immediately file the EB-1A to prove you're extraordinary, but you can concurrently file a Form I-485, which is the final green card application. That gets you a work authorization card, and you're allowed to stay here in the country, even if your OPT expires, as long as you file it before the end of the 60-day grace period. So that, but you do need to be sure you have a good faith chance of winning. So you certainly want to speak to an immigration lawyer before you would quickly file an EB-1A. I want to talk about EB-2, National Interest Waiver green cards, because that can also be sponsored by yourself without an employer sponsoring you. It does require you prove that you have an advanced degree, which is either a master's or a PhD, or a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience. Or if you don't have any of those, you could prove that you are a person of exceptional ability, which has its own odd definition. But if you meet that primary criteria, you could apply for a national interest waiver green card as long as you can prove that your area of work has substantial value to the people of the United States, that you are well situated to continue to bring that value to the United States, and that what you bring to the table is so important to the people of the United States that it doesn't matter if there's a qualified US worker out there that can do the job. That is the toughest criteria to prove of all of them. But I want to give a very positive piece of information. In January of 2022, the US Immigration Service came out with new policy guidance to the USCIS officers on what they should consider when deciding national interest waiver applications. And it's very, very favorable to foreign nationals. It introduces a whole host of evidence that is very favorable that many of you in the call will qualify for. So I do want to bring that to your attention. Now, as of this month, EB-2 is not current for anybody, meaning there's a backlog for people from every country around the world. That means you can go ahead and quickly file an EB-2 national interest waiver petition, but you cannot quickly file the adjustment of status application, which would get you the work authorization card and permit you to stay here past your current status expiring. So that's a little scary. If you're from India or China, it's a very long backlog. If you're from any other country in the world, it's a short backlog. Right now, it's only a 3 to 4 month backlog. So if you were to file one right now, you might be able to wait the 3 or 4 months before you can file the final application, all before your 60-day grace period expires. But time is of the essence. You need to reach out to an immigration lawyer. It's just not something one should be doing themselves. Lastly, EB1C is for multinational executives and managers. This, of course, just like the L1 I described before, requires you to be abroad for 1 full year working for the multinational company. So while that may not be an option right now for maybe most people on this phone call, if all else fails and you thinking maybe I should go abroad, work for 1 year so I can get an L1 to come back, and then I can get an EB1C. And this is especially attractive to people from China or India because there's such a short backlog in EB1 compared to everything else. It could be a very interesting option. You should never do this without speaking to an immigration lawyer before you leave the country, because there's so much you need to do when you're abroad in order to qualify to come back.
Awesome. I'm gonna jump in and take us through the Cap-exempt H-1B visa now and the Open Avenues program at this point. So Jeff talked about a few work visa options. He talked about going back to school, and he talked about some green card options as well. And one of the other work visa options that is available is a cap-exempt H-1B. These are very similar to H-1Bs. It's the same visa. However, it is not subject to the annual lottery cap. These visas can be approved, filed and approved at any time of year. They have the same qualifications, the same travel restrictions, or you're able to travel on it. And the difference is that it is only, these are filed by 4 types of organizations in the United States. And these 4 types of organizations are universities, government research organizations, nonprofit research organizations, or nonprofits affiliated with a university. If you work for one of these 4 types of organizations, part-time or full-time, then you are eligible to have a cap-exempt H-1B filed for you. You don't have to have one of these organizations enter you into the lottery. So for example, Open Avenues is a 501c3 nonprofit affiliated with 10 colleges and universities across the United States. And that means that Open Avenues is a cap-exempt organization, and we can file visas for our employees at any time of year. Now, this is awesome if you work for one of these organizations, but you are all trying to work for your own companies in full-time employment. So I want to talk through the concept of concurrent employment, because in the United States, you can hold more than one H-1B at the same time. It just can't exceed an unreasonable amount of work per week. So you can have 2 part-time visas, you could have 1 part-time visa and 1 full-time visa. And the reality is, and the law says, that if you work part-time for a cap-exempt organization and spend 5 to 8 hours per week in this part-time employment, contributing to the US society, which is the intention of these 4 types of cap-exempt organizations, then any US employer can file a cap-exempt H-1B for you as well. So for Open Avenues, we hire foreign nationals through our Global Talent Fellowship Program for 5 hours per week. Our fellows work for us part-time, and it enables all of their full-time employers to file a full-time cap-exempt H-1B visa at any time of year. So I want to introduce to you our Global Talent Fellowship, which is an immigration solution for international innovators, experts, and entrepreneurs who are dedicated to building the future US workforce. Congress deemed these 4 types of organizations cap-exempt because Congress knew the intention of Congress was to continue to enable these organizations to do good work that is benefiting society And Open Avenues is focused on doing just that. We brought 75 foreign nationals into the program, and they were in our program in 2022. We had a 99% approval rate of our cap-exempt H-1B visas for those individuals who we sponsored through our fellowship. And we had 10 partner colleges and universities who we brought our fellows to contribute and train students in their fields of expertise. So our model at Open Avenues is that we have foreign talent who we hire from companies. So companies actually partner with Open Avenues, where if you look on the left side of the slide, companies come to Open Avenues that have global talent that they want to keep or retain. Companies partner with Open Avenues, and we hire their foreign talent into our Global Talent Fellowship to train US students at our partner schools. And our partner schools get access to our fellows to contribute to help their students on their career paths in the United States. We help students with specific hard skills and soft skills training, and we help them launch careers. So all of this is what it goes on in our Global Talent Fellowship. The fellowship experience is that we have fellows working for Open Avenues for 5 hours per week within their field of expertise. Specifically, we hire STEM and business professionals into our fellowship program to lead projects, host workshops, develop skills building materials for students. And they do this, the fellows do this throughout the year, or as long as they need to maintain a cap-exempt H-1B in the program. So we actually will bring on the fellows to lead these types of projects on behalf of their companies or on their own. So you can see an example project here is from our partner company, Dino Therapeutics, and our fellow Nishith. She launched a molecular biology project for students. It was a 6-week project that she launched multiple times throughout her fellowship to engage students and build their careers. It's an awesome opportunity to actually give back to your community, give back to US society, and also be able to stay and work for your company full time. And these are done remotely. So Nishith, this picture here is of one of our fellows, Nishith, actually in person, because her company paid to bring the students to the company for a site visit. It was so nice of them to do. That was above and beyond. All of our fellows work remotely for 5 hours per week from home, leading these projects and learning opportunities for students. And if you have a moment to read this quote from our fellow Ketki, she just had an incredible experience in the fellowship. And she was able to not just be able to stay in the US, but it was an opportunity to build leadership, build management skills, and obviously contribute to these students' lives. And it's a pretty impactful experience for them. The timeline and the way this works. So companies, as we said, the fellowship requires a US employer to contact Open Avenues on a fellow's behalf. We call this the nomination process. So Open Avenues is partnering with companies that want to retain or keep their foreign nationals or bring individuals from abroad. So companies can nominate an individual through our website or schedule a consultation with an Open Avenues staff member to talk through the fellowship opportunity and the program and the visa process. Once we have that consultation, we will do a screening of the candidate and an H-1B evaluation for free upfront. We would never take on a fellow if we didn't think they were qualified for an H-1B visa. Then we sign a contract with the company that is going to nominate an individual for the fellowship program. That whole process takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and then we start the visa process. So it takes us 6 to 8 weeks to take someone through the cap-exempt H-1B visa petition process, the filing, and hopefully get an approval at the end. Again, we have a 99% approval rate, but we have had some RFEs. That's normal. It's nothing above the average for what Jeff's firm or other firms see for H-1B visas, but that could extend a few weeks as well. So 6 to 8 weeks is the timeline to get an approval on a cap-exempt H-1B. And then the beauty of the model, as we talked about, is that the full-time employer is then immediately able to file their own cap-exempt H-1B visa the very next day. And once that visa has been filed from the full-time employer, you can begin working for them right away. So ideally, in about 8 to 10 weeks from when we file the visa, you are able to be working for open avenues in the fellowship and for your full-time employer in cap-exempt status. If you're coming from abroad, and I have an asterisk here about when the fellowship begins, because if you're coming from abroad, you will need to get a visa stamp on your passport at the US consulate abroad to then enter into the US and start the fellowship, and then have your employer file the concurrent visa. So this is a little bit of an extended timeline depending on what country you're in. Eligibility to join the fellowship program, it is similar qualifications to an H-1B visa. You must have at least a bachelor's in a STEM or business related field. H-1Bs are open to anyone with a specialty occupation. Open avenues in our fellowship is mostly focused on STEM and business fields. This could include, business includes marketing, it can include graphic design. There are operations research, market research, those can be included in the business related fields. We have a lot of finance fellows in the program. And then of course, science, technology, engineering, and math is a wide variety of types of programs. This is because this is where there's high demand from our university partners to help to support students in career development. We require 2+ years of work experience in a related field. Your OPT work is absolutely included in this. If you've had internships, we can include that. We like experience mentoring or working with students and peers because that's what you're going to be doing as an Open Avenues Fellow. And then we do require that you have a job offer from a US employer that's obviously, as we talked about, going to be nominating you and financially supporting the fellowship as well. So this US employer has to be willing to sponsor your work visa because they are going to file that concurrent cap-exempt H-1B as soon as you are approved for the Open Avenues cap-exempt H-1B. So again, just to review, the process is nomination from a company, a consultation with Open Avenues, and then an evaluation. And that is how we go through that beginning stage of understanding if you're qualified and if we're going to contract with your company. There is a financial commitment for companies that do partner with Open Avenues Foundation. So we charge an $18,000 initiation fee. This is including the legal fees for the cap-exempt H-1B, government filing fees, and premium processing. And it gets a response within 15 days of filing. We also charge, once you start in the program, a quarterly program fee that goes to launching these educational opportunities with students. And there's huge benefit for the company in terms of pipeline development. They get access to those students and that talent. So that's another benefit from those program dues. But those are invoiced at the beginning of each quarter. And this is very important. Everybody is in our program for a different amount of time. So we take people on a rolling basis throughout the year into our fellowship. And we file 3-year visas, which is the max you can file on an H-1B petition. However, individuals will exit our program when they have another visa solution or they win the H-1B lottery. So folks might enter our program this August, coming up this August, and they might be in our program. If they win the lottery in March, they could exit October 1st. So they'd be in our program for a little over a year. If you're entering the program right after this year's lottery because you don't win, then you are going to be in the program until the next lottery. If you win, then you can exit October 1st of the following year. So those program dues are paid quarterly until you exit the fellowship. The salary component is not a fee to the company. It's a structure so that we're able to pay you for 5 weeks of employment. 5 hours per week of employment. As Jeff said at the very beginning, To qualify for an H-1B, a company must pay the fair wage for your work. Open Avenues pays all of our fellows the fair wage for their work. And the way that we do this is by splitting the salary that a company is offering to an employee. So we actually will take a portion out of that total salary that they offer, and it comes through Open Avenues Foundation. Just really briefly, we had 80 foreign nationals in the Global Talent Fellowship last year. 79 partners nominated a foreign national. That was a 63% increase, so we're growing quickly. And our fellows come from all over the world. We had 24 countries represented by our fellows. So if you are interested in joining the program, you can have a company nominate you on our website. There's a place where they can click and submit a nomination form. Erin, if you don't mind dropping that page into the chat, that would be amazing. You can also email me to schedule a consultation, or email Erin. And Erin, if you can put our emails in too, that would be amazing. And for foreign nationals, you can go to our website, to our Global Talent Fellow page. There is a form that you can submit, an inquiry form, where you'll get more information. Erin and I just developed a new resource for foreign nationals that will help you go to an employer and have this conversation. This is a lot of information. It's a lot of complexity. And one of the barriers is that companies sometimes are so unaware of what a cap-exempt H-1B is, that this is unfamiliar to them, and they don't understand it enough to even consider it moving forward. They also don't necessarily know all of the other benefits that come with the program. So when someone joins our program, they're not just getting this visa solution, but there's pipeline development from the university students that are being trained. And also it's a huge leadership development experience for you as a foreign national, if this is something that you're interested in engaging in. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and we have 15 minutes for our Q&A. So Erin, if you don't mind, would you come on? Is there anything in the chat that you want to start with?
Hey everyone, good to see you. Nice to meet you. So one question that's come up, and Danielle, I know you said we'll share the resource, but if you could talk a little bit about advice or tips you have to folks as they think about having this discussion with their employer.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the realities from doing this over the last 4 years is that we've worked mostly with startup companies, small to mid-size organizations, where the staff and the employees are valued and irreplaceable. So if you are working for a Big Four accounting firm, or one of these large consulting firms, or a large tech company, it's very hard to get this kind of program in front of the right people. If you're working for a small startup, chances are you're going to get an HR professional to be able to get them on the phone with someone from Open Avenues to at least explore this option. So that's some of the learnings we've had. But in terms of having those conversations, we'll send you the sheet, but it's really going to be about the ease of the timeline and the process itself, and how Open Avenues manages that entire process. This is about it being a leadership opportunity for you. This is about the pipeline and that the company will get access to, the community work and social impact work that comes out of this when the company engages. And in addition, our approval ratings and the way that we've gone about building this, and Jeff's background is really helpful. So we'll send you all of that information.
Danielle, could you talk a little bit about what happens if an individual joins the fellowship and then they get laid off or their company shuts down?
Yeah, so if someone joins the fellowship and then they get laid off, okay. Yeah, so this is the environment that we're living in right now, right? There's a lot of uncertainty with companies and employment. And this is something that Open Avenues has obviously been dealing with. We have 80 fellows working for different companies across the United States, all different size companies. There's a lot of uncertainty for our fellows, so they've asked this question. The answer is, if you are in cap-exempt H-1B status with open avenues, unless we let you go, unless you leave our program, you maintain that baseline status. So if an employer lets you go, you still have the 5-hour per week cap-exempt H-1B with open avenues. Now, we rely on employers paying for the fellowship, of course. So we do require that you look for a new employer, and we have individuals take personal time during that time while they are figuring out their next steps. So you can, you can stay in our program for some period of time while you search for that next opportunity. It's personal time, so not everybody is taking that, but it is an opportunity for you to maintain cap-exempt status in the case that you're let go.
Danielle, could you talk a little bit about the different ways in which a fellow would exit the program and maybe an average of how long fellows are in the program?
Yes, the fellows are in the program for an average of 1 year. And we have individuals exit mostly when they win the H-1B lottery. We've had many individuals exit because they get a green card approved. So when you are in H-1B status, it is a dual intent visa, meaning you can have a green card filed for you at any time. So many of our fellows have employers that are filing green card petitions for them as well. And when they get that work authorization, they are able to then leave our program and enter into their work authorization through their green card. You could get an O1 extraordinary ability visa if you check off a few more of those boxes. But I'd say those first two options are the most common.
A couple of questions came through about the salary share. Could you go over that again using an example of maybe a total salary of 100K?
Totally. Yeah, it's a little complex. So for the salary share, the way it works, we didn't want to add another cost to companies, but we have to pay all of our fellows the fair wage. So what we do is we have the company maintain whatever they were going to pay as their total cost. So if they offered $100,000 to you as your salary, then they're still going to pay $100,000. However, 5 hours per week is going to be calculated at the fair wage that Open Avenues needs to pay. And Open Avenues invoices the company for that amount quarterly, and we pay the foreign national that amount through the payroll. So let's say we calculate that $10,000 is going to be what we need to pay annually. We will actually invoice for that 10,000 over the course of a year and pay that portion to the foreign national. And then the company will directly pay you 90,000. That's the salary share.
I think we're all caught up on questions. Jeff has
Okay.
been a rock star in the chat.
That's amazing, amazing. Does anyone want to hop in with anything else? And you can just ask the question out loud to me, or Jeff is probably happy to answer anything as well.
Hello.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for the presentation. Can I ask a question, please? You know the on the list on the website, Open Avenues website, where you have all this list of companies that's
Yes.
with the program, yeah?
Yes.
Who do we approach there to say, hey, who are you the Open Avenues contact? The reason why I said that, I'm looking at the VA, there's a veteran home loan company, which I've just identified. I'm looking to approach them. The reason why, I'll tell you why. My son is about to join the Navy, and I just thought it would be nice for me to just work with that kind of company while I'm actually looking after him. I know it's as in just overseeing what he does, not in that way, but I'm just saying. So it's because he's got autism, but they actually want to recruit him in the Navy still.
Amazing.
So I just thought I just want to be around. So for me, I have got to he's an American citizen anyway. So for me, I've got to apply for something that will make me be there on the ground. So I just thought it just makes sense in one place. So who do we approach in this kind of companies to say, are you the Open Avenues person contact?
Yeah, so the HR individuals, or I mean, and I can get you more information, but absolutely the human resource departments at these at these companies are aware that we've partnered to help them retain the individual. So if you mention that you're approaching them because you saw that they're partnered with Open Avenues,
Yes.
I mean, I think that they'll definitely recognize that as a familiar organization, and they understand the Cap-exempt H-1B process that we facilitate with them. So I think just referencing to human resources, most times in these smaller companies, as I said, the CEOs or CFOs are involved, but I don't think that's who you're going to be reaching out to.
Yeah.
But human resources should be engaged.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good point that if you're looking for employment, you can go to the Open Avenues website and look at the employers who have sponsored past fellows and nominated past fellows and contact them. I think it's important that you mention you heard about the organization you heard about the company through Open Avenues Foundation, because they understand our program, they understand the model. They obviously have been successful bringing on individuals through this process of Cap-exempt H-1Bs. Anyone else want to hop in?
I have one question. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's super helpful and informational. The question I have is that the 6 to 8 weeks that you listed in the timeline, is that with RFE or without RFE?
Oh, that's a good question. We do not pay charge more for requests for evidence. We include the request for evidence.
She's asking not about the cost,
Oh.
but the time
Oh,
it
the
takes
time.
to process
Yeah,
Open Avenues to process the Cap-exempt H-1B petition.
Right. So that is without the RFE. So if there is an RFE, and Jeff's firm helps do all of our visas for Open Avenues Foundation, they are very quick at getting a response out. Usually it takes just a couple more weeks. And because we file with premium processing, USCIS has to respond to our request for evidence in 15 days as well to our response. So it is an extension of about a month if it does happen.
got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Danielle, a question came through about timeline. So if the STEM OPT expires in June, when should a candidate start the process and start having those conversations with their employer?
Yeah, I'm so glad this question came up. So we talked about 6 to 8 weeks to get an approval, but there's an additional 2 to 3 weeks for contracting. So if you can contact Open Avenues at least 2 months, ideally 2.5 months prior to your OPT expiring, that's going to be ideal. If you're 6 months ahead, it doesn't hurt to get in our system to have your employer have conversations with Open Avenues to get ready for when you would need to move forward. So let's talk about folks who have expirations. I mean, June, July, you're going to want to contact us right after the lottery. It's our busiest time, of course. And so you're going to want to start having conversations and getting in the application process as soon as possible. For folks who have expirations throughout the remainder of the year, it's still important to get in touch with Open Avenues and have these conversations happen, mostly also for your peace of mind. It's really nice to have your employer aware of this solution and on board so that you know that you're not going to be running up against a hard deadline, and it will alleviate stress for you later on. I also see someone asked about the quarterly fees. So the $3,800 quarterly fee is per employee. If a company has multiple employees, we can talk about different pricing structures, but for the most part, we're working with companies that are nominating 1 to 2 employees for the fellowship. That's nature of us working with startups and small to medium size, I'd say seed to Series B companies. So that's really why we're working with 1 individual per company. Anything else before we hop off? Any last questions for Jeff?
I had a question. Thanks again for this presentation. So just given the timeline, when like I know for other processes, when you file is when you like start maintaining status, even though you are not able to work immediately.
Right.
So just wanted to understand, like in those during like this 8 weeks process, you are not maintaining status, right? It's only when the Cap-exempt H-1B comes back that you have status.
I hear you. Yeah. So open avenues, I mean, you have to have a visa filed for you before your OPT or your grace period of any visa status expires, right? So if your OPT is expiring, you need to have a new visa filed for you within a certain within that grace period. Our goal is to file before your grace period because
Okay.
you are going to be maintaining, you can stay in OPT until we get an approval for our visa. So you can stay in your current status until we file a change of status to Cap-exempt H-1B. So for most individuals in our program, they're in OPT and they tell us what their expiration of their OPT is, and we try to file ahead of that date. And we file ahead and we say, you know, we're going to have a start date be a few weeks before. And that gives breathing room in case of an RFE, of course. But the goal is that we have that filed and that you can work in OPT until you switch to Cap-exempt H-1B.
Got it. And a follow-up question on that, like say if while we work with our companies and so on to get this approved, we fight for another status, like say, I mean in my case F2 because my spouse is on F1, then does that like create issues with the whole process, or is it very easy to switch back to another status?
So if you're asking if you change to Cap-exempt H-1B, is it hard to change to a different status?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, yeah, sorry, it's a bit maybe too specific, but I'm saying like, if I file to maintain status with another category, so in that case, F2, while concurrently working with you guys, by the time you get the H-1B Cap-exempt stuff, doesn't make anything difficult in terms of like switching from one status to another? Understood.
So you need to extend your F1 right now, and you're wondering if you have both of those processes going at once, does that change
Exactly.
anything? Yeah. Jeff, did you hear that question?
I did.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, when you say you need to extend your F1, I think, are you talking about the visa stamp in your passport, or are you talking about getting a new I-20?
No, sorry, I'm on an OPT, ends in May, end of May, and so like considering those timelines that we talked about, and just like getting my company onboarded, I would like open avenues wouldn't be my last resort solution, right? I would have other ways to stay in the US, and in my case, it's like through my spouse, filing an F2. And so I was just asking, like, if I do that now, just to get some breathing room, but then in the process, I also like get to convince my company to work with you. Like, does that create some kind of an issue where I'm asking to switch from OPT to F2, and then later on from F2 to H-1B Cap-exempt?
It certainly complicates things, Zach, and I might urge you to hold up on filing the F2. You have some time. Your OPT expires in May. You have a 60-day grace period. You have a little bit of time to file that application timely, and it does complicate things if suddenly an employer is filing a Cap-exempt H-1B for you, because when you are allowed to have two applications pending at the same time, but the one that is approved the latest rules. So it could be that your H-1B Cap-exempt is approved, And although you try to withdraw the request to change status to F2, USCIS doesn't match up your request with your file, which happens all the time. And suddenly they approve it. And now it turns out your H-1B is no longer good and you are in F2 status. It's a hassle. So I just would urge you to hold up a little bit on filing that change of status to F2.
Okay,
I
thanks a
wanna-
lot. That's very helpful.
Thanks both. So I had a few people, 5 people liked this question, meaning it's burning for folks. But we'll end on this one. And the question was, how do we justify that $18,000 fee in conversations with employers? We priced this out based on, obviously we have incredibly high costs to file cap-exempt H-1Bs with the US government with the amount of employees that we have in H-1B status. There's also a company called Mob Squad. Many companies are actually sending folks to Canada or sending them abroad. They are priced higher than we are, and oftentimes relocation costs more money because they have to pay those relocation packages. And it's not the ideal scenario because you're not here working with your colleagues that you've been working with on the work that is helpful to be done here in the US. So the initial costing that we did was actually based off of also loss of productivity. So if you are dealing with, if you're losing an employee, having to pay a recruiter to get a new employee, and you're paying your work productivity has slowed in that interim, all of those costs are often not worth it for an employee, and it does justify that 18,000. And what they get is more than just a visa. So this is not to be compared with just them paying for an H-1B. This is an entire program where we're building talent pipeline for the company. And it's leadership development. So hopefully those pieces will resonate as well. Okay, very good. We're over time. Could talk about this forever, of course, but I'm more than happy to continue conversations. I personally don't meet with foreign nationals one-on-one just because of volume and how many people contact us, but I am more than happy to talk to employers. So I suggest trying hard to get an employer to at least explore this and get them onto a call. And then I will take it from there and talk about all the benefits that the company gets. So we'll follow up with a recording of this session. We'll follow up with our one-pager on how to talk about this to your employer. We have a handout and a pamphlet about the program that should be helpful as well. And I hope to stay in touch with you. Thank you, Jeff, for your time and for joining. Everyone, thanks for making the time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care.